Okay, bear with me here. 3, 2, 1. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at in the U.S. or around the world. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Thanks for joining us, and special welcome to our folks in Honolulu, Hawaii, ESPN. Love that you are joining us. We have got another great show for you today. Before we start, don't forget the audio, baseballoutsidethebox.com. Go there, subscribe, get the updates every time there's a new show. Sometimes there's 3-4 shows a week. So you'll get a lot of updates, and you can check it out anytime you want, right? That's what's great about podcasts. You don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can go back and listen to it. You listen to 10 minutes of it. You know, you can miss it to a half hour, walk your dog, exercising, whatever you're doing. I love the podcast part, but we'd also love for you to join us on YouTube, Peter Caliendo. We're going live there on YouTube, and we're going live on Facebook. On Facebook, if you got any questions, type them in the comments section. If you're on YouTube, do us a favor, go to Peter Caliendo YouTube and just subscribe there. Also, again, you get an update every time there's a show. All right, folks, today we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, but the main thing is going to be about the state of the game at the youth level. And you know why we talk about this, because it's so important. I mean, first of all, if you want kids to stay in the game a long time, you know, you got to do the right things. You know, people keep saying, well, they're going to drop out because of certain things. Well, if they really love baseball and they're doing well, they're not going to drop out. But if they're not, obviously they're going to drop out. So we're going to talk about some of those things with two guys that have been in the game a long time. Let me tell you, outstanding. First of all, Clark Jones, head coach at Rochester Community College, Technical College. I've known Clark since the times at Elmhurst College, a longtime college baseball coach, international traveler. He's been all over the world, scouting with the Yankees. He started at Ohio University. He's got a great background. So first, let me welcome Clark. How you doing, buddy?
Great, Peter. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. I know with COVID too, we've been shut down. But I got to tell you, folks, I only gave you a short snippet of Clark's background. We'll have all of it on the show notes. Let me tell you, because we'll be on here an hour if we go over his background. But as we talk, you'll get to see and know, you know, what Clark's all about. Joining us also, listen, a great guy. Love this guy. Met him at the ABCA several times. Tamari Story Harden. Hey, 8th round draft pick with the Dodgers. I'm going to bring him along anytime I can. He's 6'7", 270. I don't know if he's still 6'7", 270. He's 6'7". I don't know if he's 270 still. But let me tell you, former pro guy. He's the CEO of Team Avenue. We'll talk about Team Avenue. Played independent ball, scout with the Phillies. He's done a lot of stuff in the game. The most important thing he's done, he's dedicated his time to helping young players. I believe also, and we'll talk about it, a lot of youth players in the Central Valley in California. So, and this is very special because he really pours his heart into that. I know both of these guys have helped young players. So, hey, let's welcome Tamari. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, Peter.
And again,
thank you for that 30 pounds you gave me on the weight. I appreciate that. How much do I owe you for that?
You lost weight, right? During pandemic?
I found it back. I found it though.
You find it back? Well, I'm going to brag a little bit because over the year I lost 20 pounds. And folks, we talk about this on the show. You do it gradually. You don't do it right away. It's a step at a time, right? It's kind of like developing players. We don't want to throw everything at them. Folks, we're going to start here, man. This is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to this a lot. Let's do this. Let's start, Clark. Let's start with you. Give us a little background on what you're doing now with the college, especially with the pandemic. And then we'll have Tamari jump in also because the pandemic has affected all of us.
Sure. Well, a couple of years ago, I got back as a head coach in 2019, and they hired me at Rochester Community and Technical College. And it's just been great getting back into the game again. It's been in my blood. And, you know, it's a juggle. You know, I'm a realtor too, full time. But just being able to coach young people again and just being back in the game. And it's been a great experience. Yeah, COVID has slowed us down a little bit, made us adapt, adjust, but it's all good. We're making it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Cool. All right, Tamari, how about you? I know you're doing some traveling and you got some plans coming up.
Yes. So Team Avenue Baseball, you know, I started 10 years ago. So now what is kind of developed and transitioned through COVID. Last year, we kind of took a year off just because of travel restrictions. Predominantly, most of our trips are international. So it became tough last year. And so just recently, I've been putting together a Puerto Rico trip, which I'm really, really pumped up about. Just because, like Clark said, you know, that love for the game and love to kind of get back coaching wise. I have that itch, and so I've been kind of helping my buddies' organizations getting back on the field slowly but surely. But you know, it feels really good to just be on this podcast talking baseball. I know this last year was a difficult transition because, you know, with the lack of baseball, and then I kind of got into real estate like Clark. He's been mentoring me on the real estate side of things. So it's been a whirlwind, but I'm happy to be alive and healthy.
Awesome. Hey, by the way, yeah, you're right, because I know all about international shutdown. I've been shut down 14 months here, whatever it's been. But you know, we always talk, I guess in some ways, Zoom or Google and all these technical stuff have helped us because we've been able to communicate with people like we're doing now. It's fun to do this, right? Because we don't get a chance to see each other. And we hear about the negatives, and we understand the negatives, okay? Well, everybody knows the negatives. I don't think anybody has to tell us the negatives of COVID. What I love to hear right now is some of the positives, some of the things that have happened, you know, that's kind of changed your lives or changed your coaching in some ways or your players' lives because of COVID. Because again, we always talk about the negative. So Clark, let's start with you. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you from a recruiting standpoint, actually it's really, and I hate to say this, but COVID has been helpful in the recruiting process because it's really opened up the whole world, and it's enabled us to recruit. I mean, we got kids coming in from Texas, from Puerto Rico, you know, from California. And, you know, we don't have the budget where I can just hop on a plane and fly out there or whatever. So, you know, we're doing Zooms, and, you know, I'm able to connect with the players and their parents. And, you know, I send out an automation type of thing about our program. They're getting updates all the time, videos, the whole 9 yards. So, you know, it's really challenged us to think outside the box and be innovative, creative. And, you know, I think it's really made us better people and better coaches all around.
Tamari, what do you think?
100%. I think the biggest thing when it comes to COVID and the shift and the transition is players have to be more communicative. They have to, you know, they're going to have to do a lot more now than they had than ever before, because, you know, the communication side of reaching out to the coaches and being more aggressive in regards to sending an email or making the first point of contact. I feel as though they have to be a lot more aggressive now. Even with their schooling, you know, you have to be more, you have to kind of have your own regimented schedule that you put together, which is, you know, much like college and professional baseball. It's kind of like the same thing. You know, you have to be very, you have to know, you know, your time, where you have to be. Well, academically and athletically, this is really like just turning up the heat on that part, just so personal development wise, it's going to be a great benefit, not only now, but it's teaching these players how to set themselves up for the future and kind of where they're going in life. And I think that's the beautiful thing about baseball and what's going on with COVID right now. It's forcing you to kind of be more, you know, take ownership of where you're going. And before, you kind of had these recruiting companies sending out different things, but now I've always taught players to reach out to coaches so they know that you're a real person. They know it's a huge leadership skill to be able to either call or email a coach. And I feel like they're just gonna have to do more of that to get that exposure.
Yeah, you know what? Interesting about that too. You know, you look at the major leagues now, you're seeing more in the minor leagues education, because you're seeing, you know, you're talking about coaches, programs that are working with players on how to speak and, you know, how to communicate with people. You know, when I was young, we just had to do it ourselves. Nobody taught us that. I mean, we learned in school a little bit, but, you know, it's interesting because that's so important. So I'm going to stay in that for a second, Clark, because, you know, talk about, you know, like when you do whether it's a Zoom recruiting or whether it's a personal recruiting, talk about what you look for in players, what maybe might even turn you off that most people may not even think, hey, that's a turnoff.
Well, Tamari hit it on the head. I mean, the kids nowadays, it's like instant gratification, and there's a lot of distractions in the world. And so I think the players that are continually communicating with you via text, via email, calling you, that type of thing, I think that's important because that shows initiative. It shows that you're interested. It shows that there's a buy-in there. And you really get to know them as a person and know their character, which makes me feel comfortable as a coach, because I don't want to bring in just anyone. I want to bring in people that are going to fit well with the chemistry of our program. Now, let me just say something about Tamari real quick, if I may. We were on a trip, an international trip, going to Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, just right before COVID hit. We basically had like maybe a month or so after COVID, and COVID hit. So the thing that I really was impressed with Tamari and his group and that organization is that he had the players get up there and talk about their story, their life story, and really force them to communicate and get out of their comfort zone. And I think kids nowadays, they don't feel comfortable talking in front of others. And so this really put them in a position where they gained some confidence and did that. And I just thought that was really cool. Tamari did a great job with that whole trip and those kids.
Yeah, and the other day I had a coach that was going to do a Zoom call, and it was a presentation, right? And he's a younger coach, and he was all worried about it because it's different than talking to your players or talking to coaches in a room. Now you're just doing a presentation, right? And people are listening. And that's not easy. Tamari, when it comes to because traveling internationally, there's a recruiting process there, obviously, and yes, it's a business too, obviously, and that's all good. It's just like mine. But at the same time, as we all know now, no matter what, we're not talking about representing USA Baseball and national program, but we're talking about that they are representing our country, our city, our state, individuals, your family, so forth. Boy, that process of screening young people, not just young people, but their families, because they may go on the trip. I want you to talk about that, how important it is.
Well, the international trips, like you alluded to, they bring so much out of players, like when it comes to going to another culture. And one of the things that we tell them, which I know, as coaches, we always harp on, you're not only representing the name on the front, but on the back of the jersey. And that's so important for them to understand that they are representing their country, they're representing their family. We talk about character in baseball all the time. And so when you can take someone out of their comfort zone, like a kid from Chicago, and you can take him to Cuba or Dominican Republic, and they see that exposure, it's a whole nother, like they see a whole nother potential of where they can take their life. And for me, it was Australia. Bob Williams in the Goodwill series.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate of going on that trip to Australia when I was 17, and we had Tom McNamara from the Mariners, and then we had Jim Colburn. These guys were now my coaches. So I went from little El Cerrito High to, it's a small school, to going to Australia and having these guys coach me and being billeted with an Aussie family and learning from them and eating Vegemite and, like all that stuff, like still to this day is the best experience, because that's what really showed me where I can take this game. I had coaches telling me, hey, you might get drafted. Hey, they're pumping me up, and I'm starting to believe in myself more than I did before the trip. So, and then coming back, you kind of have like a little swagger and confidence about, okay, baseball, I can see where I can take this now. Mm-hmm. And for me, if that's the only thing that the players can take away from that, and then when you couple that with, the character building, you couple that with being able to public speak and being more articulate, man, you're talking about like life skills and how you can literally change the path and the trajectory of your life just from leaving your comfort zone, which is pretty powerful.
You know what? You couldn't have said any better, articulated so well. I have a tough time sometimes articulating that because, being in the game internationally over 30 years, I've always said, and yes, it costs money, but, kids in the US, they got a lot of opportunities. As you all know, they got a lot of tournaments, a lot of showcases. There's so many of them. I always tell them, look, I know it's a business, but just do it one time, do an international trip, because the growth spurt in that is just unbelievable. You just don't know the things. I've had parents come back say, I can't believe my kid's making his bed. I can't believe he's doing that. And he feels better. You just don't exactly everything you articulated. So, we brought up the word comfort zone. I want to jump to this because a lot of kids that are playing around the world play in uncomfortable situations, and I love that. You mentioned Cuba, Dominican, Latin America, all over the world, other countries. They got to play on not so great fields. They don't have the best equipment, but man, are they tough, and they can play the game because they played it in that rough atmosphere. I want to ask you this both because I was listening to the Navy SEALs talk. A gentleman who went to war, and he was the only one out of 20 that came back out of his unit. And one of the things he said was, when we come back, which I was kind of shocked, when we come back, we get assigned to different Navy SEAL units. They're never assigned to the same one. Why? Because they want them to be uncomfortable. They want them to adapt, meet new people and all that. So my question, you probably wonder, where's he going with this? My question is, I see a lot of young kids starting at 8 years old. Then they start with that team. Then they go to 9 years old, then to 10, then 11, and 12. And they're always with the same coaches, always with the same team. It's almost like they're put in a bubble. Look, I get it. If you want to try to develop a team unity and you want to try it, it's about winning, which it really shouldn't be. It should be about developing first and you win ultimately. But I want to get your ideas, what your thoughts are about that, because I'm not a big fan of it. I think once in a while you need to change coaches, and you need to see what it's like to be under other coaches. Clark, start with you. Sorry I talked long there, but I wanted to kind of get the emphasis out there.
No, I totally agree with that. And we see that oftentimes at the youth level where, a dad coaches them throughout, from little Pee Wee League all the way up. And, I had a contract with my son. It was a 1-year deal.
Wow.
And so, hey, if you want my contract renewed this year, Dakota, you're going to have to tell me why and that type of thing. And so I recognize that. And I didn't want to be one of these coaches that had to coach him all the time. And, it just so happened that he wanted me to do that. But there are other years where I just said, no, you need to be coached by someone else. And I know my wife's also a softball coach. She's coaching our daughter. And she's felt the same way, and we've made sure that Cheyenne has had different coaches throughout. And if anything, it gives you a different perspective on the way things are taught and coached. I mean, I have a certain way, I have a certain style, but then you're going to go off to college or you're going to go to a high school program, whatever it may be, and you're going to face something different. So you're going to have to be able to adapt and adjust and improvise. My dad was a Marine, and that's all he ever said to me. So it's ingrained in my head. So if you hear me say it a lot, that's the reason. But no, I totally agree with that.
Mari, the other thing I hear from parents a lot is we're recruiting. You and I recruit the players here. I hear, well, you guys going to practice before you go on this trip? And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's going to cost another, $500 just to do that. And we don't want to keep adding costs. So how are you going to play if you didn't practice? The beauty of it is now the young person who's going on this trip, they're going to meet different people, different coaches, different players. Now they got to communicate. They got to play. They might play. They only practice maybe that morning, right? The first day, and then start playing games right away. So talk about the beauty behind that, the learning experience of that.
Well, you're 100% right. There's a lot of magic by bringing players from all over the world, even all over the nation. They've never met. We've done this for years. And you put them. And I always say this, it's, baseball is a universal language. You put them on the field, you got a bat, you got a glove. They just naturally know what to do, and it's magic. I always say, that's magic when you can do that with a sport where maybe you haven't practiced, but you can go against another team that's been playing together. And then you're competitive and you might even win the game. That's something special right there. It says a lot about the players and coming together. The coaching staff has to kind of make the lineup. But yeah, I mean, those type of experiences that you can have not only as a player but a coach is why I love the game, because I'm able to mentor a player that they might be going through something, you know, and if they didn't come on the trip, or there was a cruise camp that we did before the pandemic where one of the kids, his best friend committed suicide. Um, Reggie came, his wife lost her dad, you know, like these are experiences where when you come together and you can put these players and coaches in different settings, it's therapeutic, you know, it's a way where you don't have to think about what's going on in your life, no matter how positive, I mean, how negative it may be in certain situations. In some situations, it's like you don't even think about your life on how positive it is because you're in the game and you're playing and you're reacting. And then once that game's over, then, you know, life comes back. But those 3 hours of being on the field and being able to kind of just get away from the world and just be kind of like just laser focused on the game, that's the beauty in the game. And when players have different opportunities to do that with different coaches, I might be able to give that player something that you can tuck away that's going to help him next week. You know, if he didn't have that, you know, then that interaction would never be able to happen. And then he goes back to his coach, his local ball team coach. That coach has been mentoring them. And so it's like a family. We're all coming together and we're giving them different nuggets that they're going to take and they're going to, you know, they're going to implement in their life and the game of baseball. So I think that's beautiful when that happens.
Yeah, Tamari mentioned the great Reggie Smith, our great friend. Reggie goes with him on the tours with the cruise. Reggie's incredible. Been on a show before. Just one of the best coaches, best people I have ever met in the game. And I know, Tamara, you know him well, so I know that you agree with that.
Absolutely.
We mentioned the word uncomfortable, and I kind of want to stick with that a little bit because in the U.S., as you're coaching, what do you guys do to get your players to be a little bit uncomfortable? Because sometimes they do get too comfortable with everything they have. Are there certain things that you do whether it be in practice and training or I don't know, in classroom work, where you get them to be a little bit uncomfortable and get them to adjust to it, Clark?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, we're creatures of habit. You know, we have systems in place and we know that they're proven. So we try to stick with those as much as possible, but it's really to their benefit to throw them in situations where they have to adjust. You know, we'll have a certain day where we just go off script and we do stuff differently than, you know, what we've done. And so that forces them to, you know, to adjust. You know, we'll have situations where we're scrimmaging and, you know, we're purposely trying to get under their skin a little bit, you know, give them a bad call and see how they react. And, you know, just throwing different situations, you know, at our players like that. It's real life stuff. It's not just baseball. You're going to be faced with adversities your whole life, whether it's baseball or business or family or whatever the case may be. So your ability to adapt, adjust, and improvise, as I said earlier, that's just going to make you a better person all around. So yeah, we build that into our, you know, our practices, you know, to just, you know, focus on that.
Tamari, we got some great friends here in Chicago, you know, that help a lot of young people. And I know you know most of the guys here. Matter of fact, we just sent some equipment to them. You know, they run the White Sox programs and they've done a great job. A lot of our kids are going to college baseball. You know, whether it's Kenny Fullman, I'm going to miss a bunch of names, but where there's a lot of great people here that are really helping out. You work with a lot of kids that are, you know, not privileged in a lot of ways, and they've gone through rough times. They already are uncomfortable. But how does that work when they're already there? Now you're trying to get them a little bit more comfortable, or are we still working on both here?
Well, it's funny you say that. I was talking to Marcus Nettles yesterday. Yeah. And, you know, he does a lot of stuff here in Chicago to help at-risk players. And he told me about the Chicago White Sox program, the Ace. Yeah. And we were actually talking about that yesterday. And I feel like when it comes to players, sometimes you have to, when you know where they came from, and let's just say it's an inner city kid, I'm from the inner city. So you already have that kind of like that connection. So you'll know how to communicate to where they're more likely to listen to you, because the first thing that you have to build is the trust. You know, if they don't trust you, it's going to be very, very hard to get them to listen. And then, so at the end of the day, I just think it's about reading the player and reading their actions and their tendencies and what they're telling you, both non-verbally and verbally, and then being able to kind of coach them through that piece. You know, you mentioned Reggie. He's taught me everything I know about hitting. Like I listen to. I mean, to be so close to him and travel with him, I just feel so blessed, because the things that I've learned, even back when he taught me when I was a hitter, I've been able to pass that on. So uncomfortable, there might be a 2-ball drill or putting sideways spin on and telling them and talking that language to them, and that's uncomfortable because they may not have heard those the verbiage, or they might not have heard. You might be hitting on blocks. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen Reggie put some guys on blocks, so I might put them on blocks and for balance, you know? And so for me, you know, when you combine that and you're really just adjusting to the player, and it's always helps that you have that connection. But at the end of the day, when you've coached so long, you almost meet all the different types of personality types that there can be. And then you just have to make that connection and earn that trust from the player, because when the player knows that you're there for them, and you're willing to do everything you can to help them, as long as they're willing to be able to be coachable, I feel as though then that's where the true magic happens.
You know, and that's what all three of us have traveled around the world. And that's what I love about going around the world. Every time you work with some of these kids that don't have much, you know, whether it's Cuba, again, I repeat, you know, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, wherever it may be, even in Europe, there's a lot of places where, you know, kids don't have a lot of equipment, man. But one thing they do have is they have the love for the game, and you can see them. They smile. They say hello to you every morning at breakfast. You know, something we've got to teach our guys sometimes here in the States. You know, hey, you know, you come in to breakfast, you don't just, you know, walk in, say hi to people, right? Those are your teammates. Those are your coaches. Sometimes they're a little hesitant to do that.
Hey, Peter, can I just interject real quick?
Go ahead, good.
You know, just, you know, from my perspective, you know, we have kids in our team from all walks of life. You know, we have guys from Puerto Rico, we have guys from the inner city, we have guys from suburban America. And it's good to get these people all together where they're meshing and bonding and building, you know, one common goal type of thing. And it's interesting that, you know, we have some kids that come from unfortunate environments or things where there's not a lot of things provided. And when they start talking about the fields they've played on, or the you know, the conditions they've lived under, it really makes us appreciate, you know, it gives us a better understanding of other things in life, and just gives us a different perspective. You know what I mean? And I really see kids grow through that whole experience, and they come more humble, and that's really a cool experience to see.
Absolutely. And, you know, and where I was going to go with, because we were talking about trust too, you know, I was reading, Clark, some in your bio at the college, I was reading where, you know, you mentioned the keys of building a successful program. And I want you to hit on that, because some of the things we talked about are things to build a successful program. But what are the key areas to really focus on when you're building a program, whether it be college or anywhere? Where do you start for young coaches?
Well, I think it's all about, you know, Tamara hit it on the head when you're talking about trust and love. And if you build that atmosphere, that environment, you know, they're going to run through a brick wall for you. And then from that point on, you know, we really just try to instill in them, you know, hard work ethic and quality. You know, it's not so much taking 100 cuts a day, it's, you know, the quality cuts, and are you putting yourselves in situations, you know, that you're going to get in games. And then, you know, once you start getting more of the character type of things involved in the program, then you can start looking at, okay, what are things we can do, you know, from a capital or from a financial standpoint to upgrade. And, you know, we're always fundraising for one thing or another. It's just the nature of the beast. So I just think it's a combination of starting first with, you know, good kids, good character, good families, teaching, you know, good, you know, just the way to handle yourselves, and then just building into, you know, the other aspects of a program. And I think it's just the total picture, you know, that really, you know, helps the total program. So
Hey, one thing on that, and tomorrow I'm gonna let you jump in a minute here. I want to ask, because here's the I don't know if it's $1 million question or not, but you've got character and you got talent. In college, you got to win. I want you to talk about the balance of that, because you want character, but you could have character, but unfortunately, you could say maybe the young man that can't play and he's not going to be successful in your program. Where do you balance that? How do you decide? Because we tend to sometimes, we're human beings. Sometimes we may go to the side of, hey, this guy's pretty good. I'll kind of overlook the character aspect.
well, you're right. Talent, it helps to have talent, but it's also best of both worlds. You recruit talented kids that have character. But then you know what? I've on all my teams, I've always had individuals who didn't have a lot of talent, but they had character and they had a work ethic and they knew their role. And at Elmhurst, we had a young man, and I'm not going to mention his name and embarrass him because he is a coach there in the Chicagoland area, but he didn't have a ton of talent. But you know what? As his career progressed, each and every year, he got better and better and better. And by the time his senior year rolled around, the kid was, spot starting and just playing a lot more. And, he knew how to win. He played for a program in high school, had a great high school coach. And now he's one of the better coaches in the Chicagoland area. And so, just because they don't play doesn't mean they don't benefit. You know what I mean? So I just think that, and then, and I don't want to talk about me that much, but, early on in the year and whenever I can, I really try to play as many people as we possibly can, because I think it's a total build-in. Everyone's got to believe in and have a buy-in. And if they feel good about the program and they can contribute, it's just, the whole situation is going to just be a lot more healthier.
Hey, Clark, don't worry about it. I'm going to talk about myself, and I'm going to jump to Tamari. Tamari, I couldn't throw, I couldn't run, and I had no bat speed, but I found a way to play college baseball, whether it be a utility player. So, I mean, great words, Clark. I agree with you 100%, man. I've also been on the flip side where I let that non-character player, I did it internationally, I let the non-character player, play, be on the team, and boy, that was a big mistake. Tamari, talk about that.
Well, first of all, even though Clark's not going to brag on himself, when he talks about love and when he talks about just that the core values that he represents in his program, I mean, I've sent and referred players to him, and 100%. And I think if you don't have that piece, it's like you're building on a shaky foundation versus having, core values that you can get the buy-in, like Clark said earlier. And once they see that and you have a solid foundation, that's how you build a solid program. So then the actual coaching, because you can take a player that can't throw or that can't run and make them into a great player if you have the right foundation and you have the right coaching, and you have the right knowledge, and you have the staff. You know what I mean? And everyone just kind of like knows their role, and that's, for me, those are the programs that I want to be a part of. Those are the programs that I want to create. And for me, it's more, I'm not a college coach, but it's more of that experience of maybe 6 days, 8 days of where you can literally, and I've had people say this, but their life has changed because of it. Or I've had parents that say, hey, I know you guys pray before and after. It's helped my son's prayer life. I mean, that right there is powerful. And so the ability to create that experience, or to have those players for a semester or 4 years, you want the buy-in, because that's what's going to ultimately you're like Coach Bennett used to always tell me, he wanted to create a big leaguer in life. He had a lot of great players that came through his program, but he said, I want to create a big leaguer in life. And we would, I was real close with Coach Bennett as well. I know he recently passed away, and I went to his funeral, but I was just reminiscing on all we would go to Marie Callender's, and he would literally just pour into me and like just teach me all this stuff that I've never, like, as far as coaching, I'd said Reggie taught me everything about hitting, but Coach Bennett, he really taught me everything I know about coaching. And we would be at Marie Callender's numerous occasions, and there'd be somebody sitting off to the left or the right and say, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt your conversation, but I just want to say thank you, Coach Bennett. Thank you for leaving me on that road trip, because that taught me to always be on time. You know what I mean? And or they would be saying something that he changed their life just, you know, sometimes because he required a 6-minute mile, you know. If you didn't run a 6-minute mile, you didn't make a team. He didn't make exceptions on how good you were. He didn't care.
Wow.
Because he felt as though if you can show up and you can run a 6-minute mile, you're in shape to play for him, you know? And if you can't, doesn't matter how hard you throw, how many home runs you can hit, he would stick to his guns, and he would never make an exception for a player based on just how talented they were, because he had that foundation. He had those rules, if you will, but they were implemented for a reason, because as you can see, they would, and later in life, they never forgot him. They would come and say thank you for doing that. At the time, I'm pretty sure that they weren't saying thank you. Just like our parents, and you know, they probably weren't saying thank you back then, but that just shows, like, you build a solid foundation, the players will come. The players that are the right DNA for your program, you just naturally attract them. Just like I naturally know if I'm going to refer a player to Clark's program, I know what they're going to get. I know they're going to be better men from coming out of that program. And that right there is why I do what I do, you know.
Awesome. Love it. Clark, your dad obviously was a big influence on you with, you know, in the Marines, being in the Marines, coaching wise. Who else was an influence, and what influence did they have on you? What really changed, you know, your coaching style, let's say?
Well, I've been really fortunate. I've had some great coaches along the way. In high school, two in particular I can think of. They called him Mac, Jim McLuhan. He was Donald Trump's first Medal of Honor award winner. He was my varsity baseball coach in high school. My varsity football coach was the guy by the name of Ben Brooks. And, you know, he was hard on me. You know, he was real hard on me, but it was a hard love type of thing. You know, then going off to college, Dean Kriener, Tom Tresh at Central Michigan, really taught me, you know, the game inside and out. You know, those guys were just, Tom Tresh had been around Joe, you know, Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio and all these guys, Billy Martin. I'm like, wow, I was just in awe, you know, listen to him every day. And then I was down at Ohio University under Joe Carbone.
Yes.
You know Joe real well. Joe, I mean, we speak probably a couple every other week or whatever, still to this day. And so, you know, you just take bits and pieces from all these great coaches, and you just develop your own philosophy and your own style. But in the end, you know, it really comes back to just, you know, the love and the trust. And I wouldn't be talking to these people today had I not had those relationships that were formed, you know, early on. So I just consider myself a really lucky guy. The one person I can't leave out is Gordy Gillespie.
Oh, yeah.
Gordy Gillespie never coached me. Okay. But one day when I was real frustrated at Elmhurst, and we were underachieving and we had a tough year, and I was watching this infomercial on TV, and you know, this guy was a millionaire. So he wanted to be a millionaire. So he contacted this millionaire, talked to him, and he became a millionaire. Easy as that, right? Well, I figured, man, if that's so easy, I'm just going to call one of the best coaches in the country. I'm going to call Gordy Gillespie. He didn't know me from a hole in a wall. So one Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting there down in the dumps in my apartment in Chicago. I called Gordy Gillespie up at Ripon College. And, you know, I just basically said, hey, Coach Gillespie, this is Clark Jones. And I didn't even get my name out of my mouth yet. Clark Jones at Elmhurst College. Oh, you're one of the best D3 coaches in the country. You know, I can do a great Gordy Gillespie imitation, by the way. But I said, Gordy, I'm really struggling. I don't even know if I want to be in the game anymore. And he said, well, what are you doing in 3 hours? Now, granted, he's up in Ripon, right? I'm down in Lisle, Illinois. I said, I'm not doing anything, Gordy. So he's like, I'll meet you at the Four Lakes Village pub in 3.5 hours.
Wow.
The dude left his family. He jumped in a car. He drove to Lisle, Illinois, Four Lakes Village pub. I remember it to this day. And we sat there and we talked baseball for a couple hours, and we didn't even talk baseball hardly. It was more about relationships in life. And, you know, we got to baseball a little bit, but man, at the end of the day, I felt like I could jump up on top of that table and preach a sermon. You know, and Gordy and I, we talked all the time after that. We just became best of friends. And so it's situations like that that really, you know, build you who you are, you know.
Absolutely. Hey, the great Gordy Gillespie, you can hear thousands of stories from coaches like that influenced throughout his life. And rest in peace, Mr. Gillespie. You know, an area that we're going to jump to is we've talked about all these things that are influential in college baseball, internationally, even in high school. But, you know, it all starts at the grassroots level. And we've talked about it on the show quite a bit. Grassroots level is so important. You know, our best coaching, if you really want to do it right, should be at the grassroots level. Not that I'm not saying that it's not. There are a lot of great coaches. Remember, a lot of them are volunteers too, and they only have so much time to give. God bless them. Thank God they're giving their time, or these kids wouldn't have a team to play on. But at the same time, it's so critical that things are done correctly there. Again, to stay on the positive part, because I want to talk about what are some of the things you recommend, because you see what happens at the younger levels, because you get these players. What are some of the things you guys recommend coaches at the young levels need to stay focused on, so that way kids, one, stay in the game longer because they enjoy what they're doing, but two, become better players because everybody wants to be a better player, and then the game becomes fun, and you get better players when you they get to your level, and you have to do less teaching, let's say, in a lot of ways, because they're fairly well taught certain things. I know there's a lot in the development of the game, but if you had advice for young coaches out there working with young kids, what would that advice, Tamari, be?
Well, first of all, I love what you do, Peter, with the coaching clinics and the international stuff. Reggie tells me about it all the time, and I feel as though, like, at the more importantly, at the younger age, having more coaching clinics, because that can kind of build the foundation of experience as coaches, is kind of passing that knowledge down. I was fortunate enough to be around Coach Bennett, and we would go to the little leagues, and I just sat back and just listen to him talk and kind of talk about how practices need to be regimented, and the different things that you go over. Teaching the kids, bunting nowadays has kind of become kind of like a lost art, so to speak, and the importance of bunting, hitting runs. I call it boring baseball. You gotta be really good at that to be successful. And so I don't see the younger players really focusing on those, or the coaches for the younger levels teaching that early, because that's how you win ball games right there. And knowing those little things. Yeah, we talk about launch angle, and that's kind of like the big thing nowadays. But at the end of the day, playing the game the right way, having that foundation, having coaches that have experience mentor other coaches that maybe they may be dads, fathers, and they're just out there for their kids, and they want to learn and be great coaches, because really a good coach is really a good manager, and a good manager, a smart manager, is going to surround himself with coaches that are really good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then a smart manager is going to manage that. He's going to, and so if you can do that, that's what winning programs do. And then if you can do the little things, that's how I would kind of see the missing piece with kind of like the youth programs today. It's a lot of travel ball. I get it, but kind of like creating an environment for coaches to learn. I think it starts with a coaching clinic.
I'm glad both of you guys brought up the mentor part, because I meant to say earlier, coaches, get yourself a mentor, like Clark did. He called Gordy Gillespie. Everybody should try to find somebody that, and coaches are great. They're willing to help. You just ask. Sometimes they're not they're not just going to show up and say, hey, I'll mentor anybody, let me know. But, if you ask, they'll do it. I think a mentorship program is so important. The ABCA has a mentorship program also. I know you're both members of the ABCA. Clark, how do you deal with it? Because you hear this. I hear it a lot. Well, I'm not going to teach bunting anymore because they don't use it at the higher levels anymore. And all of a sudden you get to your program, maybe you need guys to bunt. How do you deal with that? I mean, can you train them, I guess, after they haven't done it for a while?
Oh, absolutely. But there has to be some buy-in. I mean, you have to sell how important the bunting game is. The problem we run up against is every time we turn on ESPN, all they show are home runs flying out of the park, so they don't see the other side of it. And, for us, we play in the Great White North, and, the balls don't actually fly out very well when it's, 30 degrees below zero and there's snow flying. So we really try to talk about putting the pressure on the other team, putting the ball in play, bunting for a hit, making them have to bend down and come in and run and throw uncomfortable positions across the diamond. And what you're going to find is there's errors, on base percentage increases. You're able to steal more bases. But, I always believe in slumps that, one, yeah, you should hit the ball the other way. But two, very important, you should bunt more, because what's happening is you're watching the ball hit the bat. And anytime you can watch the ball hit the bat, your eye's going to come back. You're going to be more confident. You're going to make more, more contact overall, and good things are going to start to happen. It's funny because we were having this conversation on a bus ride over the weekend, and we had been struggling a little bit offensively, but we had been really working on getting bunts down, bunting for hit, hitting and running, hitting the other way. And I leaned over my assistant coach and I said, we haven't been hitting great, but I predict that we're going to have a game where we just hit the crap out of everything. Things are going to fly. Texas leaguers are going to drop in. Weird things are going to happen. And I'll be darned if we didn't score 22 runs in the final game of our series over the weekend. So I know it works. There just has to be buy-in. It's real critical from the head coach to be able to show the importance and why it's important, to get that done.
Yeah, and great point about the visual part, man. You got to track the ball all the way in. I had a lot of slumps, so I had to constantly bunt all the time to get me back going.
Hey, Peter, do you mind if I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
You mentioned the youth coaches, and I can't take credit for a lot of this, but the things that I, get from Gordy Gillespie, I think when you're doing drills and you're a youth coach, you got to get away from this one coach throwing, everyone else standing around, and one person hitting. That's boring. Okay. So, he always impressed on me to make the drills fun, make them competitive, get a stopwatch out, get a chart out, chart things, and that's what makes it fun. And you get more reps, when you get more reps and you're charting things, the kids really get into it and they get competitive. And so if I had any kind of advice for a youth coach, I would tell them to, institute those things into their program. And I think their kids are going to really improve.
Yeah, I remember the great Gordy Gillespie, as you mentioned, wiffle balls, man. He was using wiffle balls all the time. His team hit 320 without taking batting practice. They were hitting, balls all the time. Tamari, we hear fun all the time. I'll jump on that because, you got to have fun. You got to have fun. And, Clark just mentioned a bunch of ways to create a fun atmosphere. So let's stay on that a little bit. Give us some ideas there.
Well, I mean, we talked about boring baseball, and, you talk about batting practice, and you talk about tee work. Sometimes, players, they get to a place where they're like, do we have to do that again? And the answer is, yeah, you're going to have to do it today. You're going to have to do it tomorrow. And it's just kind of like getting them in that mindset of, it's not some secret, baseball's been around for over 100 years, but certain things, they just work, and not trying to reinvent the wheel, like tee work, perfect example. To a player, some players may not think tee work is glamorous, but I'm pretty sure when you're hitting 400 and you're consistent hitting on that tee and you're hitting the ball out in front and you're staying through the ball and you're driving it the other way, to me, that's fun, hitting 400. You know what I mean? So, and if you don't feel comfortable, Coach Bennett would always say this, if you don't, I don't feel comfortable putting, if they're saying that as an excuse, they don't feel comfortable hitting off the tee, or they don't feel comfortable working on certain things that you're trying to help them with, I don't feel comfortable putting a 200 hitter in the game. You know what I mean? Like, that's not willing to make adjustments. That's not willing to learn. And so I think just that mindset of, yeah, we're going to do it again and do it again. It's almost like baseball is almost like Groundhog's Day, just every day you stick with the grind, you create your grind. That's the beautiful part about it, is you create your regiment. If a coach helps you out with certain things that that you may have, that that helps you, and you bought into it, figure out a way to do it every day. Figure out a way to keep that as a maintenance piece of what you do to be where you are and to be as good as you are. So yeah, every day, try to create something that you can repeat over and over and over again, especially if it's working, and then finding out the things that maybe that you are doing every day that you might have to tweak a little bit to where it works better and is more efficient. So I think that's very important. That kind of goes back to the Zooming and being self-sufficient. And I mean, when it comes to parents nowadays in the game, I feel as though there's so many times where parents naturally want to, protect the player from failure, right? And we talk about failure all the time as coaches as being really successes, and the ability to fail, ultimately is going to, to turn into success. But I feel as though parents should kind of give the players more freedom to do a lot of the things that don't require them. It could be a regiment thing. It could be a personal development thing that they just need to do because it's going to make them better men and women, moving forward in life. So just that freedom, and it's hard to do. I know, because I know a lot of parents struggle with that. They email the coaches if their kid doesn't play, or if they're playing the wrong position in their mind, but the coach puts them in the position that's the right position. They want to kind of shield them from that, or maybe they're not playing. I feel as though, like, when we talk about playing time, that's one of the things that you can never control as a player. So why, get bent out of shape about it? And it's tough. It's tough to know that, you may know that you're good enough to be in there. Or you may be listening to your parents and say, hey, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. But you can, that's part of adversity. Like, if you're not playing, so you have to figure out a way to get in the lineup. You might have to work harder. You might have to talk to the coach. Yeah. But like, not having your mom and dad do it, I think is getting to a place where you have that freedom to be able to speak up for yourself. You have that freedom to control how hard you work on a daily basis. Those are the things that I think that if we kind of promote more, I feel as though we're going to see these young players turn into men in front of our eyes.
Mark, I could tell you want to add to that the failure part.
I'm sorry.
Oh, the failure part. Well, because you're getting these kids, and one of the toughest things in the game is to actually deal with that failure.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know what you do in practice or in situations, and how to help your players deal with that.
Yeah. Well, the one thing we try to do before a game is to put them in really tough game-like conditions where they can fail, but they're used to being in those conditions over and over and over. And the more pressure you put on them, the more successful, you would hope that they would be. But, I guess just going back to the whole parent thing that Tamari was talking about, I think a lot of times parents, they want to eliminate the pain or the discomfort for their kids. Mm-hmm. And, I just don't think that's the best approach. I think my approach is to teach them how to handle the pain and how to communicate better. We've talked about communication a lot throughout this whole podcast. And, rather than trying to solve the problem right away and go to the coach or whatever, let's talk to the young man or the young gal and have her communicate better with the coach. Go to the coach and say, hey, coach, what is it that I can do to improve more? Don't even talk about playing time. Talk about improvement. And just have a dialogue, have a conversation. Sometimes the young person may not even have any idea that what they're doing wrong or whatever. And it's also part of the coach's responsibility to continually communicate to the players to let them know what they can improve upon. I get that, but I see so oftentimes, parents will shoot off an email or whatever, and they try to make their kid feel better right away. And I think that's just a huge disservice to our kids, because in reality, parents aren't going to be around forever. I hate to say it. So they really need to teach them how to handle situations the best way. And that's the best way.
Great.
one-on-one communication.
Yeah, great points. We're talking about life skills, man. I mean, it'll take you for a long time. I still need to learn some of those life skills. Hey, we're gonna kind of close it off with this because it's the part that nobody wants to really hear. But we call it, and I'm sure you call it the same thing, constructive criticism, right? Because we all need it. I just put on Twitter and Facebook a comment about, hey, I think coaches ought to, we talk about mentors, and maybe take your mentor, take somebody that has more experience than you have, and have them come to practice to watch you practice. Have them come to a game, watch you how you deal in games. Don't say anything, just watch you. Self-evaluate that, or being evaluated by that person, because it's kind of tough to do because of our egos, right? Because but yet it makes you a much better coach. So where I'm getting with this is, what are some of the things that, because I've said it many times on the show, we're doing a lot of disservice at the youth levels, and we're actually hurting kids in a lot of ways when it comes to the development of the game. And I'll mention a couple, but I want you to tell coaches out there some of the things that maybe they need to stop doing, that we need to make some changes in. One thing I mentioned already, and that is playing on one team for 5 straight years in a row. That's not always the best thing in the world. Another one is not playing the game, 365, especially under 12 years old, because there's a lot of detrimental things that can happen if you're only playing one sport. So that's where I'm heading. I love to get the constructive criticism on where we need to improve at the grassroots level, so that way kids stay in the game longer. What are we doing, Tamari, that maybe needs to change?
Well, that's a good question. Like you mentioned a couple things. I think I would kind of, my personal opinion is really just, when we talk about winning, like everything's about the trophy. Everything's about like coming in first place, which that is the pursuit of that is the part where I think that needs to be tweaked. The pursuit of winning, the pursuit of being number one at whatever you do, and the pursuit of winning that trophy in first place. But it's like, it's almost like the trophy is more important than the kid's arms nowadays. So they'll let a kid throw and throw and throw, and it's really only to win. It's not to know that kid has a future besides the 13U championship game, And I think that's one of the things, we can go into arm care and things like that. But I think one of the things that I have seen is just the disregard of the player's body, when it comes to pitching, when it comes to throwing just to win, the kid might throwing 100 pitches and come back the next day to throw more, or it gets out of, throwing 100 pitches and then goes and catches, things like that, and it just being respectful of the fact that player has a future besides that, whatever level it is. So taking care of the player's arm is one of the things that I would say that I want to see a better job of that.
Yeah.
And I think by just that mentality, it's gonna allow you to be able to, keep your players healthy.
Absolutely. Clark, what do you think?
Well, I totally agree with Tamari. I'm a big Mike Krzyzewski fan, and I love listening to him talk, and I always try to learn as much as I can from successful coaches. And one of the things that he continually harps upon is they hardly ever talk about national championships. They hardly ever talk about a number. We got to win X amount of games in order to win a championship. And I've tried to model myself, through Coach K's philosophy is, let's talk about improvement. Let's talk about how much we can improve each day, and if you continue to make little strides each day, by the end of the year, you've made a lot of strides. Stop associating your self-worth with a number. All right. But look at overall improvement. And that goes for the game of life. I mean, how can we get better every day in our personal lives? What can we do in order to improve? I've always been one to believe that, you hear people say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I don't believe in that. I believe every day, let's tweak something to make it a little better. Let's continually get better and better and better. And so I don't know, that's always been my philosophy. And I've heard a lot of coaches, speak that as well. But more specifically, some things, I wrote some notes down here. As far as youth coaches and how they can approach their kids to get more out of them. We've always talked about the constructive criticism sandwich. The meat, the meat of the sandwich is the point you want to get across, but that's second. You got two pieces of bread, on the top and the bottom. And the first thing you start off with is, hey, you really did this well. I love the way you did this. Here's something that you might want to think about or try differently. That's the meat of the sandwich. And then follow it up at the end with, I love how you're working. I see you improving every day. You see what I'm saying? They're going to be more receptive to a constructive criticism sandwich than starting right off like, you didn't do this, or why, what were you thinking? You know what I mean? There's a big difference on delivery there. So that's something to think about. And then finally, and I don't want to talk too long here, but more specifically from our level, we focus more offensively on quality at bats. We don't really look at batting average. And we have all this criteria, hitting the ball hard, moving runners, those kind of things. And we focus more on quality at bats rather than a batting average. And we really, on base percentage, runs scored, those are really kind of two things that we really look at, pretty heavily, with our offense, and not focus so much on the number, the batting average number. So I don't know,
I love that, because, the reason I started the show was because I wanted to educate coaches, parents, and players, because you have to have that strong education. Tamari mentioned coaches' education. I mean, if we don't educate our volunteers, help them as best we can with, how to work with young kids and run practices and make it fun. I mean, you just mentioned, here we are talking about, quality of bats, and, we always focus on pitching and hitting only in one way in a lot of ways, right? We judge it in one way, but what about the defensive part? What about the base running when you're doing stuff well there? Kids should be praised for when they're doing good things in all aspects of the game, right? They dove for a ball. Wow. I mean, a lot of kids won't die for a ball. You really tried hard for that ball. I mean, so I agree with you guys. I think it's awesome. Here's the other part of it. What about your advice to parents out there? Because parents ask this quite a bit. There's a lot of showcases, and there's a purpose for showcases, but sometimes showcases, you don't deal with the failure aspect there, because they just give you another opportunity to do it over again. Tamari, what's your advice to players, parents, and maybe coaches that are taking players and teams to showcases, to handle it better, so they don't get overwhelmed with all this?
That's a great question, Peter. I get asked all the time from parents. They sometimes parents, depending on what the age of their kid, they sometimes panic, and that panic sometimes leads to just feeling that they have to sign up for everything they see, every email they get. They just don't know what to do, and they hit that panic button. What I try to articulate to them and tell them to kind of pull back a little bit, and really, when you get an email, first of all, I think it's important for the players to have some type of desired outcome from going to a showcase, right? Most players might say, I want to get seen, right? And so there might be a bunch of college coaches with clipboards, and you get 5 swings or you get 10 swings, and then you take a couple ground balls, and pretty much that's it. And so the follow-up, like, so let's just say a player did go to a camp where they had 25 or 10 coaches, or however many, but I always, kind of give advice for them to follow up, get the coaches' emails that attended the showcase. Because at the end of the day, that is what I was talking about earlier, as far as players taking ownership. And when you go to a camp, have some type of, what do you want to get out of it? I think that's important. Not just to go, not just because they're college coaches there. Is there a certain school that you're interested in, and they're going to be there? Before the pandemic, I always advise players to go, if they're looking at like a Harvard or a Yale, look and see if they host those camps at Harvard or Yale. Most schools, they have baseball camps. So this gives the player an opportunity to get in front of that coach to be on first name basis with them now, They get to see you play. They get to coach you. You get to kind of see their style. You get to see how their delivery is, and then how they their perspective of pitching, hitting, fielding, whatever it may be. And then you start learning a little bit about the school's culture as well by going to their camps, because they have their whole staff there, and they're going to preach what their culture is. And so instead of going to maybe a camp where you've had 200 scouts there, but you kind of get lost in the shuffle with that number, because you just become a number then. But now you just put yourself in position to be on first name basis, which is a big difference. And for the coach, they get to see you play. They get to see how you react. They get to see your communication skills. They get to see your leadership skills. So when you actually kind of target and you create your kind of like your experience that way, because there's a lot of things you can do by just calling and asking questions of whoever's running the program, because if those answers don't align with the player's reason of going, then right then that should tell you that camp's probably not the best exposure camp for that player. We do international stuff. I want parents to ask me about like the culture side of it. I want them to know what type of baseball are they going to get. Is it a baseball trip, or is it a traveling kind of going from place to place with a little baseball in it? You know what I mean? Like, I want those questions, but I think parents should feel comfortable asking as many questions as possible. But before you start asking questions, you have to ask as a parent what you want for the player, but most important, that player's got to know what they want for themselves. I think that's important when you're looking at selecting a showcase or a camp.
Yeah, and speaking, Clark, about that, what about, because you guys see a lot of players, as scouts, or whether they come to your college, you got open tryouts. What's your advice to the players, how to prepare for it, how to act at these showcases? Sometimes you got to stand out too. What do you do differently? What can you do differently to stand out?
Well, honestly, I look at this whole recruitment process as if you're an investor. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to have a diversified portfolio. So I guess what I would say is, go to a showcase, go to instructional camp, go to clinics, do well in games, put together a nice quality video where you're actually speaking and, putting some game film in there, some, showcase or some highlight clips and stuff like that. Make sure you're reaching out to coaches, sending them letters. Personal notes go a long way. And just combining all these different things. International trips, we've been talking about that. Tamari, I'm telling you, what a great, and I know you do it, too, Peter, but you expose all these kids to great coaches on the trip, and you're just opening up the book. Here you go, guys. Here's all our experience. For a week long here, we're going to talk about all these different things, how you conduct yourself, how you're going to communicate, how you promote yourself. And Tamari did a super job, on his trip that we recently went on. So I really think you have to look at it as a total diversification of a portfolio, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. If I get a lot of times people just send you highlight films. I mean, there's only so much you can tell from those kind of things, So I guess I just like to be hit at all these different angles, and it just says more about their motivation and who they are and type of person they are.
Hey, here's how we're going to close it off. This is great stuff. And I got to tell you, folks, if you listen to the show quite a bit, there's no pre-script questions here. I get emails sometimes from guests saying, hey, can you send me a list of your questions? I don't have a list of questions. I love to just talk and listen to your answers. I think that's the key. Listen to what you say and hopefully get something out of it, and then kind of revert a question from there. But so you guys have done a fantastic job with this, because they have no idea what I'm going to ask them. Sure, they got a general topic, but they have no idea what I'm going to ask. And I think that's the best way a lot of times, because it really spurts the mind, all of a sudden, boy, I thought about this, and jump in anytime. But on this one here, if you were commissioner of youth baseball, you're running the league, or you run all of youth baseball, let's in the US, what would be some of the changes you would make to help the development of the game for these young players. And I know, again, I'll give you an example so that way it gives you kind of a thing to think about where I'm heading with this. If it was me and I had a league of like my 10-year-olds that were pitching, or 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds, they can only throw fastballs. Can't throw any other pitch till you master that area. That's the league I would start as commissioner. But there's other things that people can come up with. Tamari, what would be, I see the wheels spinning there a little bit. What would be something you'd love to see changed maybe that would help the game develop, young players better?
Well, I think when it comes to the way that I see the programs, because I travel nationally and I see different programs, and I think it's great. Like last tournament, I saw a team from Chicago in Arizona. I think that's one thing that I would change is being able to like go from like Chicago to Arizona. What a great experience, because you see the teams kind of bond with each other on those trips. You have the hotel. I remember to this day, like being able to stay in a hotel, for a baseball trip. I just thought that was the best thing ever, because it was always local before that, Little League and, high school, but I never had a chance to really go to like, Bob Williams, he created some opportunities for me. Like we would go to Santa Rosa and things like that. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't have to be international per se, right, but just seeing a team travel together, because travel ball, there's teams that do a lot of events, but within that travel, implementing personal development pieces to that trip, having those players like Clark says, how we have them talk and have them articulate and tell. We need to know their story. That's how you connect with players, and everybody has a story. That doesn't matter where you are, where you've been. You have a story on where you are today, and when you hear that, you naturally want to kind of help that person. If I'm hearing a story, and especially if they've, there's a kid not that long ago. For him, his mom sent him on the trip, but she was dying of cancer, stage 4 cancer, right? His dad sends me an email kind of explaining it, and then I was able to talk to the kid over the phone and mentor him. And so when you hear a story like that, and you're on a trip, and how much that trip meant to his mom and to him, because when he came back, she passed away. But when you have that personal development piece to baseball, and not just kind of roll through it a little bit, like have something that's regimented, that's going to force them to talk about where they're going, where they've been, what they want. Because we don't hear a lot from them. We hear a lot from the parents. I get it. We hear a lot from sometimes coaches that brag on them. But players need to be able to market and sell themselves. And the more they tell their story, the more that they're able to be in front of their peers and tell the story to their peers, then that might transition to some players say, hey, coach, all those public speaking things you had us doing, this super helps me out in college right now because I'm having to do it now. Thanks, coach. That right there is like, man, that's powerful to hear that. And it makes me feel like we're on the right track with that too. Because, I feel like that's a big piece that coaches can add so much added value to their program by acknowledging it and actually implementing it. And so I guess it's a mixture of the travel, but you don't have to travel to implement that in your program, but having that part of it, I would like to see more of.
Yeah, Tamari, I'm with you. And I think as they travel to another state, but when you get 50 teams from different states, they also get an opportunity to kind of judge themselves where they're at nationally, because a lot of times you're the big fish in the small pond, but now you're in the big pond. Now are you the big fish anymore?
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I just think we got to be careful to put pressure on parents and doing too many of these trips, because there's a lot of cost in that. And that's the thing I think gradually we can do. If you got 10-year-olds, maybe, I use Chicago as an example, 10-year-olds maybe are traveling around Illinois, right? I mean, and then maybe at 12, you're going outside the state to maybe 3-4 states. And then as you get older, more competitive, maybe you go even further. So I just, that's the part that worries me a little bit, is the expense we're putting on, a lot of the pressure with the parents. The other thing is, Clark, here's, I'm not a big fan of this, and then I'll back it up. I'm watching 10-year-olds getting rings when they're winning a tournament. Okay. Look, I have friends that run major tournaments, and they're giving rings away. It took me 50 years to get a ring. Okay. And I'm not saying that we should all be the same as everybody else. It takes a long time to do something, but you also see names on the back of the cap and fitted hats and great uniforms. And when are they going to earn this? You know, I've been to Japan over 40 times. In Japan, there's an earning process. You have to earn what you get. And I don't see that. And I think that's going to hurt the game more than anything, because then kids expect it. Again, that's my idea, Clark, but I want to hear yours on what else you think.
Well, I guess, if I was a commissioner, like you had talked about, so often I see kids lose interest in the game because of a coach that maybe didn't create a great image, or was a bad example, or degraded them and didn't make them feel good about themselves, and they walk away from things. And that breaks my heart. I just think that I would like to see some type of universal training, education. And, I know a lot of the times these are volunteer coaches or whatever, but maybe we ask a little bit more of them each level that they go up, so that they're educated in, human communication and personal values, but also the fundamentals along the way. I just think, in all walks of life, we're asked to do professional development, and we're asked to, improve in our professional lives. It'd be nice to see some kind of universal program to where we're expecting these of our coaches, because they're teachers. They're the future of these kids are the future of our world here. And so why wouldn't we want to invest as much time in them as we possibly can by providing them, this great tool? And
Yeah,
so I think,
go ahead.
yeah, no, I just think if we can provide that to them, and they provide a great education, a great experience to them, I think you're going to see the numbers in our game increase as well,
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you're both educators, and that brings up a great point, because I've always said, especially nowadays, because Tamari mentioned travel teams. Travel teams are training all year round. The good ones give kids a break. They let them play multi-sport, do multi-sport stuff and all that, and have athletic development in their programs. And I'm all for that. But what's unique is, because they have them most of the year, I can say I have a 10-year-old. I have to send my 10-year-old to school. That person has to be educated. But yet now I'm putting them with a travel program, and they don't have to have any educational program or any background, any teaching background. I mean, we need to think serious about that. And that's why I think what you're saying, I'd love to see even more baseball camps. Remember, we used to have baseball camps when we were kids, right? You go to a camp and you can improve, and you're around different coaches and kids. We don't see that anymore, because times have changed. But I hope that the travel programs, and I know the good ones do this, give the kids a break, educate them, put them in, like everything you're talking about, the different difficult situations at times, really mentor them and all that. Hey guys, I'm going to let you close it off with this. Any last comments that you want to say? Remember, we've got coaches in the U.S. and around the world. I always mention this. We're lucky to have over 100 countries listening. The coaches from 100 countries that listen to the show. Everything we're talking about doesn't just relate to what happens in the U.S. It affects everybody in the world. Kids are no different, coaches are no different, and parents are no different. So Tamari, let me start with you, and then I'll let Clark, close the show off. Any last comments you want to mention to everybody in the world?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you again for having me, Peter. This has been great, talking baseball and kind of getting each other's perspective on these different topics that we've been talking about. I really appreciate the invite. As far as coaches around the world, I mean, just like we tell the players, be passionate about what you're doing, know that you're doing it. We had our chance to play, so I know, when it comes to living out our playing days, we got to be in this for the players, and for, and helping them with their careers and their future in the game, and conducting business in a ethical and reputable way. Teaching these players like some of the things we've been talking about on the show, core values and how important a character is. And on the baseball side, the player development side, surround them with great minds, great baseball minds that can just pour into them and give them hitting tips, pitching, defense, like just kind of surrounding them with coaches that know how to teach, I think is very important. So if you can do that and your heart's in the right place and you're doing it for all the right reasons, you're going to be mentoring these kids, because like you mentioned earlier, Peter, we're coaches, but we're mentors first. And when we can mentor somebody else, whether it be another coach or a player, that's your way of giving back to the game, and I know this game's given me a lot, and I want to continue to give back, and I encourage, everybody out there to do the same.
All right, Clark, you're the closer. Close it off, my friend.
I'm the Rolaids relief man.
People are going, what's that?
Again, yeah, right. Well, again, Peter, it's just been a thrill to be here with both you guys today, and I just really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for having me. But when I told you that story about Gordy Gillespie, and at the end of the talk that we had, I said, Gordy, what can I ever do to repay you for what you did today? I mean, you dropped everything for me. And, I didn't know what he was going to say, but you know what he did say? He said, now it's your job. You can repay me by going out and doing what I did for you for other coaches. And so that's why we do what we do. That's, Peter, why you do what you do. Tamari, it's our job now to give back and share with people our experiences, our life experiences, our playing experiences, and just make people around us better. And so, I took a lot away from that. That was a really big, huge life lesson for me. And to this day, I'm surprised that I was able to tell that story without breaking down and crying, because a lot of times I get emotional when I talk about it.
You know what? Great stuff. And I'll tell you, I'm one of those guys that Gordy influenced. I never played for him, never coached with him, but was able to be around him, and God bless him. I went to his funeral. There were thousands of people there. Again, a shout out to our good friend, Gordy Gillespie. Hey guys, I was going to pull off, I don't know if you know I'm sure you know who he is. He's famous, but I was going to pull off a Joe Rogan and go 3 hours. Joe Rogan's podcast is one of the best in the world. Over 10 million people listen to him. But his podcast go 3 hours and very informative. I'd love to do that, but you guys I think you'd be a little mad at me because I already took you over the time limit. I want to thank you. So Tamari, thanks buddy for joining us, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Tamari. Appreciate everything.
Thank you, Clark.
All right, folks.
You guys.
That is Tamari Story Harden and Clark Jones joining us today. Special thank you to both of them. Did a fantastic job. Special thanks to Brian Kroc, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us on Facebook and on YouTube. Don't forget, go to both and subscribe on YouTube. Peter Caliendo, subscribe to the podcast audio, baseballoutsidethebox.com. Stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you, and we'll see you on the field pretty soon.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.